B, will you just kill that one light behind me, please?
Hey everybody, this is Sergeant Debbie Kalish with Johns Creek PD, and we are doing a blab on active shooter and what to do if you are a civilian caught in an active shooter situation. And I have Sergeant Todd Hood and Sergeant Shannon Lane with me. All right. I'm good.
Are you good? You got good sound?
The echo, I'm going to have to take it out when I start talking because it messes me up. All right, you can go.
You're good now? All right. Shannon, I'll kind of start us out a little bit, and then Sergeant Lane here can kind of talk a little bit about the history of active shooter a little bit. But really what we want to talk to you guys about tonight is really we want you guys to know what you should do if an active threat, active shooter, I know we call it active shooter, but if someone is actively engaging you at your place of business, your place of worship, places that you shop, whatever the case may be. So we just want to give you guys some basic understandings of what you should be doing, and then talk a little bit about what you would expect to see if law enforcement was coming, which obviously we would be coming, and then what we would expect of you. So really, it's really just a matter of preparing. We kind of thought, we were joking around the other day about how, you know, people put their seatbelts on. I mean, one, it's the law, but people put their seatbelts on, you know, to ensure that if they are in an accident, then, you know, the safety belt will keep them from being further injured. So do you put your seatbelt on because you're paranoid? No, you put your seatbelt on to be prepared in case you're in an accident. And that's kind of the same thing here. So we're not trying to paranoid, you know, make folks paranoid or anything like that. We're just trying to prepare them. And it just kind of opens up your mind a little bit of you know, just thinking about things you should do and be aware of. So I'll start out just kind of talking just a little bit about the acronym. I'll let Sergeant Lane kind of come in and give you a little bit about the history of how this stuff kind of developed, a little bit of background on maybe a couple scenarios or something that some very tragic incidents that, you know, we had to learn from through, you know, law enforcement had to learn from and change our tactics, but also what we've been able to learn from and teach the civilian world so they're better prepared. God forbid something like this happen where they're at. So throughout this presentation, I just want you guys to remember there's an acronym called ADD. It's ADD, and that's avoid, deny, defend. All right. So quickly, avoid. If you have the opportunity, we're gonna just talk about just avoiding the shooter or avoiding the person that's creating the harm wherever you're at, and then denying them entry to where you're at. So if you can't avoid the situation, we're going to teach you talk to you about denying them entry into where you're at, and then we're going to talk to you about defending the people that you're around, defending yourself. It might be family members, might be coworkers, whatever the case may be. Sergeant Lane may talk a little bit about denial, like sometimes when things happen at your workplace or somewhere, people almost go, man, is that really happening? And people are in denial about it. That's not the type of deny that I'm talking about. So I don't want you guys to be confused. I'm just telling you, if something does happen, avoid, deny, defend, ADD. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in depth once Sergeant Lane kind of gets done with his portion of just kind of talking about how this kind of came about. So
yeah, I think you know,
Sergeant
first
Lane?
and foremost, what I want to let everybody know is the information we're providing to you is a study that was done by the FBI. It encompasses the year 2000 to 2013. And one of the main reasons we study things that have happened in the past is, you know, there's a famous quote: "Those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it." So we try to study past events. One, it helps us maybe not necessarily predict future events, but it helps us prepare for future events. So that's why we're looking at those years and we're trying to study those things. So we're talking about active shooter. I go, what's important is this study cites an active shooter event involves one or more persons engaged in killing or attempting to kill multiple people in an area occupied by multiple unrelated individuals. Now, what's significant about that definition is no place in it does it say anything about guns or shooting. So specifically when we talk about this, we're talking about active threat events. not just an active shooter, not just somebody with a weapon, firearm. We could be talking about somebody with knives or somebody with improvised explosive devices, whatever means they're trying to use to commit mass murder. And that's what's important. These people are committing mass murder. So as we go through this study, like I say, it starts from 2000 to 2013. Over the course of that time frame, there were over 160 active threat events that occurred that were documented in the United States. So from 2000 to 2013, we're talking about 11.4 events a year. Okay. What's very important in that is the first part, 2000 to 2007, events were occurring at a rate of just 6.4. And from 2000 to 2013, that jumped up to almost 6.4 events per year. So the frequency of the events is obviously, it's increasing, and we're getting more and more of these events. Last year alone, in 2015, there were over 60 active threat events in the United States. Over 60 events. That's a lot. That's a lot. One of the main things a lot of people want to know throughout this study is, how many people were injured, how many people were killed. So over the course of that 13 years, there were 486 people killed in those 160 events and 557 people injured. So when we start talking about a profile of the shooter, everybody likes to get into these, CSIs and Profiler and a lot of law enforcement shows where they try to generate a profile that are committing mass crimes. Well, in the active threat world, there is no significant profile for us to look for or go forward with. It ranges all the way from a teenager all the way to somebody in their 80s. They come from all races, all religions, all backgrounds that are currently living within the United States. Male, female, like I said, teenagers to the elderly population. Like I said, the frequency of the events are increasing. What's one thing we've noticed about the people that are committing these crimes is they study, they learn from the past. They'll find murder books or what's the word I'm looking for here? Help me out, Todd. I'm drawing a blank.
Think about like back in the days. We don't hear much about it now, but like when you talk about Timothy McVeigh and you talk about the gentleman that had participated in the bombings in Atlanta, like the Anarchist Cookbook and stuff like that. Like they'll go back and study tactical ways. Sergeant Lane and I being on the SWAT team, we know that there are people out there that try and study our tactics for the purpose of actually going through and trying to, infiltrate what we're doing and make it weaker.
Yeah, manifestos. Like these people they put these things online. They use social media as a way to, create fear, create terror, and that's the thing they're trying to do. But one of the main things we've noticed about the individuals that are committing these acts are they're studying the past event. They want to try to top that. All right, they're looking for sensationalism, especially when we go back and we look at some of the events that we have in the study. Each event seems to try to top the next event, and when we're talking about homegrown people that are trying to commit these crimes, that's what we're looking at. And, terrorism is another step up. That's kind of another direction. But when we start talking about the homegrown people and we start talking about the profile, they're very deliberate individuals. They're going to be very focused, somewhat detached from society or the groups. They always seem to be on the outside, kind of looking in. They seem to have this anger type motivation where they feel like they possibly have been wrong. And it may be a justifiable wrong. They may have been bullied or had an altercation in the workplace where they feel they've been wrong. But the thing is they start to focus on violence and anger as a way to get that release for them. So they kind of start this planning process and then this long downward spiral, and it kind of ends in the act of violence itself. And the Columbine shooters, there was a long, drawn-out plan that happened. It wasn't something that just occurred overnight. So the attacks they're very seldom that they're spontaneous. They're mostly long-term plans that these people are doing. They'll sometimes post intentions on social media. You'll see, people that are just, they're hitting the workplace. You'll see threats.
Hey, Sergeant Lane, can I touch on that for a second, what you're talking about? So with what Sergeant Lane's saying, I know everybody has heard, especially when we talk about terrorism, this and that, there's a big thing, if you see something, say something. I think, the crazy thing is that what happens is that when somebody comes to work and they go on one of these rampages or something like this happens, then as the investigation goes through, once the incident's done and the investigation goes through, law enforcement finds out that there were so many signs given to either coworkers or family members, and people go, man, something wasn't right with this person, something was going on, and this and that. And although we as law enforcement can't act on, we think they're going to commit a crime, we can't deal with that as far as the criminal aspect, but we can deal with it in a different way. So I'll give you a prime example. So one of the things that are near and dear to me is, veterans coming back with PTSD and stuff like that. And, my fear is that at some point, a veteran maybe within the city of Johns Creek or wherever, and it could happen anywhere, maybe goes off the deep end, for lack of a better term. And my fear is that somebody, a family member, a friend, a coworker, somebody knew something, and had we made contact with this person prior to and maybe given them the opportunity or helped them in a direction to keep this from happening, then my fear is that their life is over, or something happens, or they take somebody else's life and becomes a very tragic event, when really, if people see the signs and they contact the appropriate people to deal with that, then maybe some of these things wouldn't happen. Now, that's not always going to be the case. There are people out there that conduct, terrorist attacks and this and that. That's kind of more the see something, say something. But the same thing, we hear about coworkers and family members and friends or an ex-girlfriend going, oh man, yeah, this is what happened. And, yeah, that's my ex-boyfriend, and he posted something on Facebook or whatever that was threatening. I mean, those are things that we need to know in law enforcement, because it's not that we're going to go out and arrest these people. Listen, we get these people the help that they need, but if we don't know about it until the incident occurs, times it's too late, and it's a very tragic event. They lose their life, maybe a law enforcement officer loses his or her life, and at the same time innocent civilians get hurt, when in reality, if we can stop it because we're given this information, then that's a better way of doing that. So like Sergeant Lay is saying, he's right. A lot of these people go through and they plan, or they have this downward spiral of something tragic happens in their life, or they do have some kind of PTSD or something, and all of a sudden it just kind of spirals down really quickly. But over the course of 2, 3, 4 weeks, maybe a few months, maybe half a year to a year, there were all these signs that if somebody would have just said something, we could have been more proactive in getting them the assistance they needed instead of waiting and responding to it.
Yeah, definitely. So, as we kind of talk, wind down the conversation about the profile of these individuals, a lot of people want to talk about the locations, and everybody always thinks school shooter. Well, the study has shown us that actually, of the 160 events, only 25% of them actually took place in an educational environment. Another large percentage of that was in commerce. That seemed to be the biggest area where these events were occurring at a rate of almost 43%. So when I say commerce, I mean your diners, your shopping malls, your very public places where, like I said, there's going to be multiple people that aren't really connected, that these people they're targeting. And the shooter's connection to whatever location or site that they chose, believe it or not, they're only actually connected a little over 50%, 53% to be exact, of the 160 events where there is actually a connection to the location, as in a workplace or a former job or a place of education that they've attended. So as we start looking at the events, some of the main events that we look at is Fort Hood, Texas. This was the first attack at a U.S. military base. What's interesting about it, it was committed by a military officer. He was high-ranking. He was a psychologist. Unfortunately, the federal government and the way the military code of justice system is, that isn't actually considered an active shooter event. They haven't labeled it as such. They still consider it an act of workplace violence. You know, in the law enforcement community, it's unfortunate the event happened, but the active shooter training that we do as law enforcement is what led to stopping that suspect and the rampage that he went on at that thing. Both officers who are credited for ending that event by stopping the suspect had attended the alert active shooter training that we go through as law enforcement. What we're giving you today is more of kind of the civilian side. So you look at Fort Hood, Texas, and that event alone, you know, there was one shooter, 13 people were killed and over 30 people were injured. Of the 160 events that occurred between 2000 and 2013, 158 of those events were single shooter events. So a lot of people get hung up on multiple shooters, and you hear a lot of times, well, when that call comes out for us in law enforcement, it's kind of an all hands call. So no matter what we're doing, if I'm off duty, if I'm in plain clothes and I see that event, if I'm capable of going, I'm going. So I'm going to respond to that event with probably a badge, a gun, my blue jeans, and my T-shirt on, and I'm going to go to that area and try to do my best to stop that threat. So a lot of times what happens is people who are there will mistake law enforcement's response as possibly another shooter to the event. And Sergeant Hood's going to touch on what to do as far as when law enforcement responds and how to act if you are an armed citizen on the scene a little bit. But that's, you know, those are kind of the historical events. Some are more sensational than others. Some get a lot more publicity than others. One specific that doesn't get a lot of national attention that occurred was Reliable Metals, Alabama. Now, this event was very significant in Alabama, but received very little national news coverage. This happened in 2009. There was one shooter. He started by killing his family. He then went mobile and started shooting at random people. He ended up at his former employers, and he eventually committed suicide when confronted by law enforcement. And he was able to kill 10 people before it stopped. But just in 2009, that's not too long ago, and it goes to show you how the media will grab hold of what they decide for the day, what they want to make sensational.
Hey guys, we have a question here from Froggy, and they want to know, do you think more people should open concealed carry to help with this type of problem, or what are your thoughts in general on the idea?
Todd, I think that's a good question for you.
All right. Well, I'll kind of give you what I do when I'm off duty, as far as when you talk about open carry. Even if I'm not carrying as a police officer off duty, when I open carry, I never let people know that I'm carrying. And what I mean by that, and I'm not getting into a Second Amendment thing or anything like that, but the thing is that when I carry off duty, I don't want people to know I'm armed unless they need to know I'm armed because I'm responding to a threat or dealing with a threat against somebody else or whatever. So when you say open carry, that's just some personal advice. I've watching some training videos and things like that. I've actually seen people be attacked because their weapon was shown, and people try and take that from them. I think it's better to just keep it concealed. I don't know what states everybody's from and this and that. I mean, obviously pay attention to your state laws, but like here in Georgia, we just have a carry permit. So as long as you have that permit, you can carry outside your home and this and that, and it doesn't have to be exposed to where people can see it. So my advice to you, as far as just carrying like that, when you talk about that, I would always not let someone know I'm armed until they need to know that I'm armed based off of me responding to a threat or something. So specifically, here's the thing. When I carry off duty, and I hope that when many civilians carry as well, I hope that you understand that that's a weapon for defense and not offense. And so let me explain that a little bit. So with Sergeant Lane and I being on SWAT specifically, it's not that I don't want you to think that we take weapons and we're going out and we're offensively dealing with people. But if we're serving a search warrant, arrest warrant, or whatever the case may be, we're prepared for a battle. We're taking the battle to somebody maybe based off of what the warrant is or whatever. So we're going to be very well armed. We're going to be very well equipped. We're going to have large numbers, lots of ammunition to be able to deal with what we're dealing with. But when you carry around town, or we carry off duty, you're really carrying either a 5 or 6 shot revolver, or you're carrying a pistol that may have 11, 12, 13 round, magazine capacity, maybe one in the chamber, whatever the case may be. But that's not really an offensive weapon. You're not really trying to take the fight to somebody. What that weapon should really be used for is defense. So when you think about an active shooter or a threat coming into, let's just say, your place of business, because that's very easy, you need to worry about defending yourself and defending the people immediately around you, because this is what happens. In an active shooter situation, somebody's calling 911, law enforcement's coming. And there's two sides of the fence you're on when law enforcement gets there. You're either the good guy or the bad guy. And I hate to make it sound so simplistic, but that's really the truth, because if we're responding to an active shooter, whatever we're being described through our dispatch, it's a male, it's a female, whatever the case may be, what they look like, what clothes they're wearing, whatever, we get there, and if they're describing a male of a certain race or a male wearing certain clothes, or they're saying, armed gunman walking through the building shooting people, we get there and we see a male that's armed, just automatically you're on the bad side, because we only have a matter of seconds to really decide really quickly, is this the person or is it not, if they're describing a male with a firearm. So you have to be really careful about that, and just understand that we're not promoting taking the fight to people. We're not promoting you going out and hunting, for lack of better words, hunting the suspect down. What we want you to do is defend yourself, defend those people immediately around you. Let's just say if you had a certain workspace at work, then you had 5, 10 coworkers in there, whatever the case may be. Defend yourself, defend those coworkers, and just know once law enforcement gets there, you hear law enforcement coming, whatever the case may be. Some people teach, put the weapon down, that's your weapon. I want you to keep it. I want you to be secure with it. Holster it. And this is the best thing, because, open hands and me seeing your face, that's not going to kill me. This is what we need to see, and just be compliant.
Hey, Todd.
Yeah.
So you kind of just said it, but I want you to go over it because there was a question. So
Yep.
Nick asked, so anyone with a firearm, when you respond to an active shooter, would be considered the bad guy. So just kind of explain over that a little bit again.
Well, yeah, let me explain. If we're running to, let's just say a school, we'll say a school in this case. If we're running to a school and we're hearing that there's a subject there with a firearm, if you have a firearm in your hand, we have to make that decision really quick. Are you good or are you bad? So when law enforcement gets there, we want you to be holstered or that weapon secure, hands up. We can see your face. We can see what your action is. So we have to decide very quickly. And so it's going to be a very chaotic scene. You got to remember, too, in a situation like that, there's going to be, if it's a school, there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands of kids running. There's going to be adults, teachers running. If it's a legitimate active shooter, then there's going to be some injured, people. There might be some deceased people that we're dealing with, and all these things that we're having to evaluate very quickly. So we don't want you to be armed when law enforcement gets there, and we don't want you to go on the hunt, because if you're walking the halls of the school or you're walking the halls of your workplace looking for this bad guy, one, I can tell you, you're going to be outgunned by the bad guy, because most of these active shooters or people that are coming into workplaces or schools are armed with several weapons, hundreds of rounds of ammunition, multiple clips. Some of them have IEDs or improvised explosive devices. So you're going to be outgunned right off the bat. So hunting them down is not what we want you to do. We want you to protect yourself, protect those people around you. As law enforcement is coming up, holster the weapon and hands up. And the reason I say it so simplistic about you're either a good guy or the bad guy, because I really want you to understand is like when law enforcement gets there, we have to decide very quickly who's with us and who's not. This person right here, that's an easy, hey, that person is with us for a minute. We're probably still going to pull you down or whatever the case may be, but there's a bunch of tactics on what we do and dealing with that. But it's just better to just go, hey, holster the weapon. Don't go hunting for the person. Obviously, if the person comes into your space at that point, then you got to defend yourself and other people. Yes, absolutely. Don't go walking the halls. Don't go looking for the person, because that's what we're doing. And we don't have the time to deal with you and confront you with a firearm out, because, again, we're looking for we also train if there's one, there's two. So if we have dealt with one, then we see you walk in the hall too. That's just a confrontation that we don't want to get into. So we're trying to educate people on what we want them to do. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
I think that was a good answer.
Mm-hmm.
I got a couple of applauses or claps, whatever that is. So maybe it did. All right. Yeah. Yes, it did. Got it.
Nick said yes.
All right. Good deal.
That was a good
deal.
question.
Did you have something started, Lane? You want me to kind of go into this real quick?
No. I mean, charge on.
Okay. All right. So at the beginning, and we've got a few more people in here too, is the acronym that I want you guys to remember is ADD. Avoid, deny, defend. And we're just going to break those down very quickly to just kind of let you know what that means. So give you a little bit of background. The information that we have that we're presenting to you right now came from ALERT. ALERT is an acronym. Law enforcement, military love acronyms, so that's just what it is. ALERT is Advanced Law Enforcement Rapid Response Training. All right, so what that is that's basically, that's not SWAT tactical training, that's not this, that's first responder rapid response training to a highly aggressive, highly volatile situation where people are being assaulted or killed, and we need to get there very quickly. So Sergeant Lane been through that training. I know Sergeant Kalish has. I'm an instructor on that, so we've learned to do that. But then the civilian side too, we've all been to the training too. ALERT put this training on too, which is the civilian response to active shooter events. And the reason they call it that is, like Sergeant Lane said, it's just an easy thing to go, well, when people go active shooter, I mean, you know, people can come into your workplace with a knife or an axe or whatever the case may be and still commit murder and assaults and all these things. But it's just an easy thing for people to understand. So all of this is it's not the way, it's just a way of what we teach. But with us going through this and researching a lot of information out there and going through all the training that we've been through, to me, unless somebody's come up with something better, this is the best way. And this is what I would teach my family and my friends. So this is what I'm teaching you guys, the same thing. So the acronym, avoid, deny, defend. The first thing we want you to do, and I kind of touched on a little bit, even if you are an armed civilian, all right, is that we want you to avoid the shooter, avoid the bad guy at all costs, all right? So if you hear something in your workplace and you have the ability to run out of the situation, run like your life depends on it, because it does at this point. Now, I tell people all the time, and I don't mean to pick on the ladies, but women with purses and jackets and all this stuff, listen, those things are replaceable. People are not. So when I tell you to run, I mean, get up and run as quickly as you possibly can out of the situation and get to a safe place. Then call 911 and describe what you've seen or let us know what's going on. If you see people coming to the scene, like that, you know, co-workers or whatever the case may be, coming back to work from lunch or whatever, keep them from going in at that point, because you know of what's going on in there. So leave the situation. Be aware of your entries and your exits to wherever you work or you go to school, wherever the case may be, because 9 times out of 10, or I should say 100% of the time, I bet when we go to work Monday through Friday or wherever people work at, they go in one entrance and they go out that same entrance or exit every day. Be aware of different entrances and exits to the buildings that you work at, you go to school at, you spend a majority of your time at, because the person that's coming in to commit this violence may be coming in the primary entry or exit that you're used to going to, and you need to quickly understand that may not be the spot you can go, so you need to take a different exit. So just be aware of the exits in your building or where you're at, all right? Even if you're on a second story. Now you may go, oh, Sergeant Hood, that's pretty extreme. Well, if you're on the second story and you have a glass window, you may have to bust the window and jump out, because the bad guy's right outside your door, and it's either face him with a gun or whatever weapon he has, or get out of the building. Now listen, you say, oh, well, Sergeant Hood, that's pretty extreme. Well, an active shooter in your place of business or your place of worship or wherever you're at, that is extreme. So if I have to jump out the second story to protect my life, listen, I joke around all the time. My knees are bad enough as is. It's, you know, I'll live with bad knees, but if you get shot, you know, 9 times out of 10, you don't live. So you want to avoid the situation. Think about what you're doing. We tell people when they come to the seminar, say, hey, look around, go to your place, Start going into different entries and exits so it just feels natural to you. So if something happens, you don't even really, you're just kind of moving because you've already kind of prepared for the situation. So the best thing to do is avoid them at all costs. All right. I like exercise every day. I'm kind of seeing the comments over here. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that too. All right. So deny. Now, I don't want you to deny what's happening. We want you to understand what's happening in the situation that you're in. We want you to go, okay, wow, I just heard something that sounds like fireworks in the middle of the day in my workplace. That might be gunshots. Hey, I would rather you act on something and it be nothing than not act on something and it be legit, and then you've placed yourself in a bad situation and either harm's going to come your way or something. You need to deny the person. You hear it, you think something's going on, deny them entry to where you're at. So the first thing you do is you try and avoid it, run. If you can't, then what we want you to do is we want you to deny this person that's coming to your place of work or place of worship, whatever. We want you to deny them entry to where you're at. So a lot of people don't understand. In commercial buildings, most doors leading to the outside, they have to be, they open outward, all right? They open to the outside, all right? That's fire code and stuff like that. So be aware wherever you work or wherever you're at, be aware of what the doors do so you know, am I either trying to secure this door in, or am I trying to secure this door to keep it from being pulled out? So just be aware of what kind of door you have. Barricade the door, lock the door if you possibly can. Turn the lights off into the room and barricade the door with any and everything you possibly can. You say, hey, Sergeant Hood, all there are a bunch of chairs. Hey, we want you to at least slow them down. Anything, any obstacle that you can put in that person's way, do it. Because 9 times out of 10, they're looking for a soft target. And a soft target means they're looking for, and I hate to say it to you like this, but they're looking for children at schools. They're looking for people that aren't going to fight back because they're cowards. All right? That's what they are. That's what they're looking for. And that's why, too, majority of the time, when they hear law enforcement responding, they kill themselves. Majority of the time. Why? Because they don't want to fight. If they wanted to fight, they wouldn't be going to a school or a workplace or some sporting event where people are not prepared for this. All right, that's not what they'd be doing. So deny them any and everything. The bigger, the better. The heavier, the better. You want to slow them down, and if at all possible, completely keep them from coming into where you're at. So avoid them, then deny them entry if you can't avoid them, and then defend. Now, when we talk about defend, I want you to fight for your life because your life depends on it at this point. If you even have to just take a moment before, I mean, God forbid if this ever happens to anybody, but start thinking about it now. Go, man, you know, who am I important to? My family, my friends. Who are these people that depend on me? Everybody. I mean, I don't know any of these people other than the 3 that are on, the other 2 that are on here with me right now, but I don't want anybody to have to go through this situation. But if they do, I want you to know that what you do matters and that you matter. You have value in your life. So you have to fight like your life depends on it because at this point it does. So any and everything can be a weapon. The pen that I have in my hand can be a weapon. If that's all I have, you guys are going to laugh at this. I don't know, it's some tape dispenser. But this is sitting on the desk right here, okay? That can be used. Any object that you can possibly use. And of course, if you're an armed civilian and that's what you have, man, you're prepared, you're ready to go if that's the case. But defend your position, defend the people around you, defend for yourself because your life depends on it. And what I want to tell people is I say, hey, look, you have to fight to the death sometimes, and I hate to say it like that, all right? But if the threat is still coming, then you have to stop the threat. But you're not going to fight to your death. You're going to fight to their death because they put themselves in that situation. They put themselves out there to where they've come to your place, where you work, live, whatever the case may be, and this is a situation that they've put themselves in. Sometimes it's circumstantial with people's lives and things happen, but just because bad things happen to good people in their lives doesn't give them the right to come and take yours. So you have to be prepared to defend yourself. You have to be ready to fight. Like I said, if it's a commercial building, you probably have a fire extinguisher in there. You know, I joke around with the ladies a little bit and say, man, I see some of these purses you guys carry, and these things are like, you know, there's got to be, the kitchen sink may even be in there. I don't know if it is, but use it. But any and everything works. I mean, you could look around and just about grab anything that has any kind of weight to it, has a sharp edge. And if it comes down to it, listen, you may not be some trained fighter, but these things right here, if that's what you have to defend yourself and ensure that you live through this, then that's what you use. You use any and everything you have. I'm sure Sergeant Lane and Sergeant Kalish have a couple options around their desk. I mean, there's just anything. So you do have to be prepared to fight. Now, when you're in a room and this person is just, for lack of a better term, hell-bent on coming into the room that you're at, all right, then what I want you to do is I want you to think about positioning yourself. Now, in law enforcement, if I'm having to fight somebody or deal with somebody, or even in the civilian world, listen, distance is my friend because I don't want to be up close to them. But if somebody with a weapon is coming into a room that you've tried to deny them entry and they're making their way into the room, distance is not your friend. The farther the distance, the more likely they are to get a shot off at you. So you and whoever else is up in the room, unless it's really small children that can't really be controlled, you want to get the adults right up beside the door. So when this person comes in with this firearm, now I'm never going to really tell you to do this other than a situation like this with your life. If they come in with that firearm, you've got to fight that person. But the first thing that you have to do is get a hold of that weapon. Grab that weapon, point it away from your body, point it away from people, and just hang on for dear life. And if you've got other people in the room, they should be constantly attacking this person at this point. All right. Now, I'm not talking about like if somebody was to rob you or mug you on the side of the, on the side of the street or wherever the case may be. That's not what I'm talking about. If they come and they want your wallet or their cash or your keys to your car, listen, give that to them. That's not what I'm talking about. But if this person is coming into your place to do you harm and kill you, this is an extreme measure. You have to get a hold of that weapon and fight and get everybody in the room on the same page.
Hey, Todd.
Yep.
Sergeant Lane, do you remember that one question?
Yeah, sure. Nick had a question in response to law enforcement response prior to Columbine there in 1999. And Nick, to answer your question, a lot has changed since 1999. Prior to the Columbine incident, the standard operating procedure pretty much across the country was if there was an active event going on, everybody would isolate it, try to contain it, and then evacuate who they could and wait for SWAT to arrive. That was the standard operating procedure. Since then, we've learned from that incident, from studying that incident, that active threat events now require an immediate officer response. So what that means is the first officers on scene are going immediately in and going to stop the threat. And that's their primary purpose. So, if I was to go to my kid's school and my daughter was there injured, I would have to step over her and go directly to the threat. And that's how we train our officers. We use role players. We use scenario training. Sergeant Hood puts on a great active shooter class here for the police department. And that's all part of it. We try to inoculate officers as best we can. And it's a conscious decision you have to make as an officer to know as soon as that event happens, you have to go in and directly stop the threat. And, just a few weeks ago, we had a great example of that. We had a hero officer who actually he's a chief of his department who went right in and was able to stop the threat and stopped people from getting killed. I can't wait for that debrief to come out so we can read it and learn from it. And I'm hoping that's what we do. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, so I know AJ tried to get on with us last time. He was the one that was actually in the active shooter situation up at Forsyth. So AJ, if you have a second and you want to try to step in.
There he is.
There he is.
Welcome.
Hold on a second.
Okay, there's a question right there. If somebody wants to add.
Where's it at?
Here in California, the school lockdown seems to occur in the area now on a daily basis. I feel quite strongly that active shooter preparedness should also be as proactive with the teachers and staff. Absolutely. Thank you for bringing this awareness.
Yeah, with us specifically in Johns Creek, Fulton County school system, the Fulton County school resource officers, and the school administration run through these drills. We, as a municipal police department, are beginning to work more hand in hand with them, because the reality is they may have one school resource officer at a school, but if the call goes out, it's going to be the City of Johns Creek Police Department that really comes in and takes the incident. So we try and work hand in hand with them so they understand our response. We kind of understand what they have going on administratively. I guess we can kind of talk about this a little bit, but probably just a little over a month ago, we had a situation in the city of Johns Creek where a bank robber had fled from police, bailed out of his vehicle, and was running through the parking lot of the school. And at one point, he grabbed the front doors of the school and tried to make entry into the school. We had, as he was going through the parking lot, the officers had told, our dispatch center to ensure that school knows to be on lockdown. Thank God that the school was already following their daily routine of having all the external doors locked. So when the subject grabbed on the door right off the bat to go in, the door was locked and he wasn't able to make entry. And this was just during an active school day. I think it might have even been on a Monday. So the schools are becoming more secure. And again, it's just a matter of them being prepared. And thank God that happened that day, because that could have really escalated very quickly, more than what it was. So
I think a good part that, Major Clifton normally covers when we do the full presentation, he talks about, the human brain and the lizard brain. And I think Sergeant Kalish does a great job of explaining this when she does her women's safety classes. And she basically said, women have intuition. They need to use that intuition. Human beings, as Debbie says, is the only animal that chooses to ignore its instincts. Animals immediately respond to, fright or flight, and they make a decision. Humans can tend to ignore that decision. With men, it's ego. Nothing can hurt me. I can handle any situation. Especially somebody that may have had any type of training, or possibly even an armed civilian in any case, may find themselves believing they can handle something that they're truly not prepared to handle yet at that point. Stress is a doozy. It's one of the things we do in our law enforcement training, not just as far as patrol, but also on the SWAT side of things, is we try to inoculate people with stress. One of the first things to go are your fine motor skills. So as Sergeant Kalish does in her women's classes, a lot of women ask about mace and tasers and other types of personal defense devices. Those are only as good as you train with them. If you're not training with them and using them on a regular basis, you're not going to be able to use them in a high stress situation. It's your fine motor skills go out the window. And
Absolutely.
Let's be honest, even with law enforcement, if we don't shoot regularly, it's a very perishable skill and it goes away very quickly. Anybody who's been out with a significant injury will routinely see their shooting scores lower until they get in and get practicing and get their head back into it. So, Debbie, can you expand on that a little bit from what you teach in your class?
Yeah. And the first time that you want to use pepper spray is not in the middle of some kind of situation where your adrenaline has just shot up and your heart rate's over 200 beats per minute. You're not going to be able to even figure out how to unlock the pepper spray to use it. So what happens with women, and what I talk about in the classes, but it goes for everybody, about using your instincts and just listening to your body and what it's telling you on the situation, that's so important and will save people time and time again if they can just pay attention to what it's telling them. Because from the moment you're born, you're learning how to read people and learning how to read different situations. You just don't understand it. So when the back of, the hair on the back of your neck is standing up, and, I tell my ladies, if you're feeling uncomfortable, you don't owe this person anything. Don't ignore what you're seeing just because you don't want to be rude. Women are afraid to be rude. You don't want them to think you're thinking badly of them or judging them. Well, if you don't know them and you're feeling that way, you actually really need to. You got to pay attention to that kind of stuff. It'll save your life. Hi, Nick.
Hi, how are you, Deb?
Nice to meet you.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Good, man.
Good
Good.
to meet you, Sergeant Lane, Sergeant Hood. My question really was for Sergeant Hood when you were talking about the was it ADD? Was that the acronym you were using?
That's correct.
My question was, if we get to that, can I answer this question for AJ real quick? I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, AJ, you probably need to select your default device. If you're on your phone, I can't answer that. It should be, are you on Chrome? Mozilla. Should be up in the URL bar, there should be a little camera. On the right or left side, right or left end of your URL bar. Sorry, guys. Yeah, so the question dealing with the denial part. So let's, I wish I should have done this on mobile so I could show you in my office here. If I lock the door to my office, I hide under the table and so forth, and
Don't hide.
But
yeah.
Don't hide. Okay. I must have missed that aspect, but
well, let me touch on that real
Please.
quick. You've let's just say you've barricaded your door and this and that and whatever. But what we don't want people to do is hide under something like that, because what happens is, let's just say the armed gunman did just come straight through your door and he made his way in. Well, when he comes around the corner, he or she, I'm just using terms here, comes around and you're under the desk.
Sitting duck.
That's it.
Yeah.
There's nothing. So you really have no choice. So we do teach, hey, once you barricade the door, this and that, if you know that they're armed, we want you right there close to the door, not to where they can see you, but we want you right there. That way, if they do make entry, distance is not your friend in that case. You want to be right up on them because you want to take the fight to them very quickly.
Okay.
If you get up under a desk or something like that, then you're kind of trapped. But I'm glad you said that, but I knew what you meant by it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad because that's when last we had talked about it here in the office. I was thinking, well, I guess you get under the desk. So I'm glad you said that. No, that's not what you do.
No.
So my question really came from that. Once we denied, let's assume that the shooter or whatever had had left my office. Do I stay in that denial position until the officers arrive, or do?
Yes.
Okay. So.
Yep.
I'm in a safe spot. Just wait until officers come.
Yeah, and you know what? That's a great question. You've actually brought up some very good questions, so you're welcome back anytime. So, but that right there, you're exactly right, because here's the thing. Obviously, you probably, if you have a phone at that point, you want to call 911, just let them know, whatever. And of course, we'll get to you at some point. But we would love to come up to the door and be barricaded and then deal with you that way. What happens is if people come out, and remember, we're still dealing, we understand, there's a lot of chaos at this point, no matter how big the office building is or how small it is or how big the school is. It's a pretty chaotic situation at this point. So when people are running and this and that, that's a lot of things that we have to deal with. So we're quickly having to look them head to toe, hands, whatever. We look from the hands out and see whatever to evaluate, is this a good guy or bad guy? And that's really what we're trying to determine very quickly. So we would
within seconds
ask that you remain in the room. If you got to call 911, say, hey, look, this is what we got. The dispatcher will tell you what to do or what not to do or what to say or what not to say, whatever. But stay in the room. Let law enforcement come to you at that point. And, of course, if you are an armed civilian and you know that law enforcement is coming in, holster a weapon, hands up. We're probably going to put you on the ground a little bit. No problem. When we get done, we'll pick you up. If you're not the bad guy, I'll dust you off. I'll probably even hug you and say, hey, man, you must have listened to our webinar because I see that your door was barricaded. You denied them entry, and you did what we needed to do. We'll probably hug it out because it'll be pretty emotional at that point. But we don't want you roaming the halls because that's bad. Now, if for some reason you knew that the person had gone and you had an opportunity to escape, yes, but I think that's just such a big chance that I'd rather you just barricade down and stay where you're at that point.
And that's what I guess the follow-up to that would be, he may have left my office, but we're in a 4-story office building. If I go to escape, there's a chance that I'm now putting myself back in danger.
Right, because here's the thing. We talk about, like in law enforcement, we say, okay, we train as if there's one, there's two. If there's two, there's three. And you can also see, too, from some of the incidents within the past 3 to 4 months, that there's been more than one person actively engaging the area, whether it was an active shooter, it might have been a male-female team, it might have been multiple males. And there are certain times that it's just one. It may be, and I hate to say it may be domestic related, where maybe you have a male or female that works in your office, and this person is just hell-bent on getting there to do harm to that one person, and no matter who's in between them and that person, they're just going to get through them to do it. But we always train if there's one, there's two. So even that person may have gone, there may be a second person, that person may be coming back. Specifically in the Virginia Tech shooting that happened in 2007 on school campus, that shooter went down, engaged people in the classrooms that he could gain access to, then came back and systematically shot people that had already been shot to ensure that they were dead.
Okay.
So we really just want you to stay, and that way we can get it in there to you. But that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. I haven't had that question asked, but that's a great point.
All right, great. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and back out and let AJ come on in, and Deb, I will email you back.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Big, great question, man. Thank you.
Okay, well, AJ's coming in. You guys want to answer this question from the Bronx Geek?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with going to the school faculty and finding out what they're doing to educate not only the students but their staff. I know on staff days that they run specific drills to handle certain events. Then the teachers are then again responsible for passing that on to the students. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with going to your staff and asking, hey, what are you doing in case this happens? How are you preparing my child? I think that is, hey, knowledge is power. Knowledge is power.
Yep.
Hey,
You all hear
AJ.
me?
Yep.
All right, good. Sorry about that.
Okay, so why don't you go ahead and tell them real quick what happened?
Yeah, sure. Normal day for Forsyth County Courthouse. Show up early, get in line, get in front of the judge, about 50 people in the room. And we're on the second floor, so this is pretty consistent with what Hood and Lane are saying. And just you just start hearing these weird noises that kind of sound like firecrackers, much, much louder and much faster. And turns out this guy had a pretty serious assault rifle. And all of a sudden, you just hear the officer in the room just yell, everybody get down, there's a gun. And, it's never happened to anybody. So, people freeze. No one really does anything until you see the officer sort of unholster his weapon and he shuts the door and he locks it. And we didn't know where the shooter was, if he was, in the courtroom next door. And we knew that the judge just left the bench. So we're thinking that, our judge got shot or something like that in the courthouse. So finally, everybody gets down on the ground, and it's completely silent. And all you hear is just rounds and rounds and rounds going. And they get so much louder because now thank God, the SWAT team was training across the street, and just multiple assault rifles, pistols. I don't know. It sounded like 3 minutes of just shooting, which actually turned out to be like 25, 30 seconds with a couple flashbangs and things like that. But we did probably everything that you guys said not to do because nobody obviously listened to this. We all hid in a conference room, no locks. Myself and another person hid in a bathroom adjacent to it with some little lock that did nothing. Nobody called 911 because we thought we were safe. And we were probably sitting in there in silence for, 10 minutes until you hear certain people, what Hood was saying, bang on the door saying, okay, it's, Forsyth County Sheriff's Office, put your hands up. And then one by one, they sort of lined us up. And at that point, there was they took down the shooter in the front. We didn't know any of this, but it turns out they took out the shooter in the front, and they thought there was another shooter who was the driver of the vehicle on the other side, which was the back side of the building. So they didn't really want us to go anywhere, and they didn't know if there was any other shooters. So they brought us down the emergency exits, and we had our hands over our head basically and running from the courthouse one by one to the local restaurant across the street. I say that in about 3 minutes, and it still is probably the scariest thing I've ever done, certainly ever been in. And it was a place where, you know, I go to courthouses every day for my job. And before that, it was kind of like, oh, we go, we say hi to the officers, we're all friends, blah, blah, blah. Nothing can happen because there's 50 officers here. And, you know, probably the biggest target would be, you know, a lawyer, if anything. And now I go, and some of the courthouses I go to, it's almost nerve-wracking to go in because the security is like nothing. And they all think, oh, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Well, this guy came to the Forsyth County Courthouse, and it happened. So it's pretty crazy, but yeah, we got to kind of get the chills just thinking about it.
Yeah, AJ, we do when we do the full presentation that we've done a couple times at Mount Pisgah and Perimeter Church. Our Major Clifton does the beginning part, and he kind of talks about the psychology of the event and what you're saying, denial. People don't believe it's going to happen to them, and when it does happen, there's still that initial denial of, is this really happening? You know,
exactly.
Humans ignore their intuition, and you know that ego kicks in. And it's like, no, this isn't happening, or they look to the person next to them, see what they're doing, and that's the action they're going to imitate. So until it actually switches on to somebody, this is a bad situation, I need to get down, or this is a bad situation, I need to listen. Most people they follow and do what the person next to them does.
I distinctly remember when we all got down, you know, our briefcases they were all on the other side of the room because the officers took us, directed us to get out of, you know, go to a different side. And I remember, now that I'm thinking about what you guys were saying, as they're shuffling people from one side of the room to the other, trying to clear the room, I remember going back to the other side of the room, walking, grabbing my briefcase with the mindset of, oh, if I leave here, you know, the room won't be cleared. I won't be able to get my keys. It's going to take 3 or 4 hours. And then, of course, when you get outside, you're like, you know, you're walking past basically a dead body with blood everywhere, officers that have blood all over them. And you're like, I can't even believe I was thinking about that. Mm-hmm. But it's insane.
Well, you know, you know, I was working that day in Johns Creek, obviously, and we sent a few officers up to Forsyth County to help them with whatever holding call volume they had, because they obviously had their hands full with a lot of stuff. And let me just give accolades to those deputies that day, because I saw some raw footage from some cell phone stuff. There was some construction guys across the courthouse on top of the building. All of a sudden, they pull up their cell phones. They're like, wow, you know, and I was able to watch the raw footage of that. And let me tell you, those deputies took that fight to that guy really quick and ended that situation. But you're right. I mean, that's that experience, and it's very unfortunate you have that experience. But that experience right there, you can describe it to people, but you really can't grasp unless you've been through something like that of really what's happened. And so your perspective has changed a lot. You know, it's almost like when somebody loses a loved one, then all of a sudden, you know, then they don't take for granted the time that they have with other people that they love. And it's kind of the same thing. You're like, man, I don't really take my security for granted anymore. Not that you did before, but, you know, it's a different feeling for you. Every time you walk into the courtroom now, you're a little bit more aware. And so really that brings up, it's probably made you more, it's involved more of your situational awareness. Okay. Like you're more aware of what's going on. And so really it's unfortunate that event triggered that for you. I'm glad it did, because if you ever find yourself in that situation again, I think you're a little bit more educated about what to do and you're more aware of it. So just we do want people to be more aware of what's around them. It's just called situational awareness, and we want them to be more prepared, because here's the thing: even as law enforcement officers responding to a call, I want to position myself for success to where I don't have to be in that gunfight, where I don't have to use force against somebody, because then that's a successful thing, because I don't want to determine whether or not they're a better shot than I am. If I've got the jump on them, I don't want to do that. So I really want to position myself to be successful in handling that call. And it's no different when you go out to have a meal with your family, or you go to work, in your case, whatever the case may be. You just want to have situational awareness so you're better prepared to position yourself to keep yourself from being involved and just to be becoming a victim just because you weren't aware of what's going on around you. So, man, that's a great story. I appreciate you bringing it up. I hate that you went through it, but I'm proud of my brothers and sisters to the north of us just a little bit in Forsyth County for handling that, and that was some pretty crazy stuff. And those guys and girls that day are heroes for sure. But you know, it's unfortunate the life had to be taken, but that gentleman put himself in that situation. And
yeah, they told us, you know, after everything happened, and they, you know, we all of the Forsyth County Bar and the officers, we all got together. You know, if that guy would have gotten inside the courthouse, I mean, he rented the car. I mean, he had everything he needed to do to take, like you said, hostages, or go after the more innocent of the hostages.
That was his intent that day.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully in that situation, I was on the second floor, so he had to get past, you know, probably 7 to 8 to 9 officers, and then up to us. But I mean, if he's in already and there's already one hostage, game over, right? It's okay. Who's going to get the clear shot and take him out? But thankfully he didn't, and now, you know, we've learned our lesson and put up more barricades, more officers in the courtroom. You know, and I was telling the Sergeant Deb, I was, you know, in your courtroom the other day, and I mean, in a city court where we wouldn't expect anything, you have more security there than most northern courthouses, and it's great. And people don't understand it until they're in this, but it's like, I mean, you got a guy in the front, on the side, and the rear, and it's like you feel safe, and you know that I have a job to do, you have a job to do, and we're all going to leave. And if anybody gets out of line, then they're going to go to jail. So, cool.
Great firsthand story there, man. I appreciate you telling us that.
Thank you.
Todd, I want to pick up a softball to a comment that somebody made earlier about fitness. You know, in our capacity as SWAT officers, you know, we say, you know, I take care of me getting to work out is a benefit for me, but I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for the guy standing next to me. And I think that's a big thing that's right in, you know, Sergeant Hood's wheelhouse with fitness. And another thing we try to teach people, you know, I try to stay fit for the guy standing next to me and the people standing behind me. You know, me being healthy, it's a benefit for me. And I know that's why Todd takes fitness to the next level. So, you know, Todd, you want to comment on that?
One, I appreciate the accolades there for sure.
Master here.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but you know, the thing is that sometimes in our training in law enforcement, I think it's maybe like you know, just a couple tenths of a % of law enforcement officers that have ever been involved in a shooting or something like that. So it's like, wow, man, you know, you train and train and train and you train, but yeah, I train for the day that hopefully never comes. And you just kind of have to remember that. But if it does, you want to be prepared. Like when we teach law enforcement officers and really even, you know, when we talk about civilian response to active shooters, just say, hey, man, you know, especially with law enforcement, we say, hey, look, you've shot more, you've prepared more, you've trained tactically more, you've done more than your adversary. So therefore, have the mentality that you're going to win. You're going to win whatever this situation is because you're better prepared, you're more prepared than this person that is trying to bring the fight to you. They chose the wrong person on the wrong day to choose this fight. And that's what I tell you know, people that we teach the civilian response to active shooter to as well. Say, hey, man, I hate it for this person, but we try and teach you the warrior mindset a little bit and just say, hey, look, I hate it for the person that came to that's my dog, sorry. I hate it that you've come to my place of employment or wherever, but you came to the wrong place. And if this is a fight that you want, it's not going to end well for you. You just have to have that warrior mindset. And it's funny, when we do the live seminar, I ask people, say, hey, you know, how many people in here have the warrior mindset? And you get like, you know, maybe 10 people out of 200 something kind of raise their hand. I say, okay, well, let me rephrase that. How many people would actively engage somebody with a firearm if somebody was breaking into their house to harm them or their family? Well, then you get 100% of the people in the room to raise their hand. Well, then you have the warrior mindset. Having a warrior mindset doesn't mean you're willing to go out and do harm to people. That means you're willing to defend yourself against harm, and you're willing to defend others. That's the warrior mindset. Everybody has it. Nobody's just going to stand there and not defend themselves. Everybody has it. It's just we in law enforcement have probably been tested, so we're more aware of it, whereas some civilians haven't been put in certain situations, and some people have, to where they're just more aware and go, wow, man, I do have that. So,
Okay,
but man, AJ, great story. I'm sorry you went through it, but man, I'm glad you're where you're at, and that's quite a story to be able to tell people.
Hey, Todd, you know what happens a lot in the ladies' classes, and you might get one of the women that says they would never be able to hurt somebody or kill somebody. So what I typically do is I bring up, well, what if somebody was trying to hurt your child? And Mama Bear starts coming out, and I'm like, see, you can do it. You can do it for them. You can do it for yourself, because you have to be able to protect yourself just as much as your child. I mean, your child needs you. So it's in there. They just have to find it. Yep,
it's true. Yep,
that's true. Just going back, I think I can't remember who said it, but when your heart rate or your heart rate's up and you're trying to shoot a gun. I mean, when you're in this situation, I mean, I was so I didn't know what was happening, shaking. You know, when you're running down the stairs. I mean, it's just that warrior mentality. It may exist, but when you're in it and you're not trained for it, trying to, I'm sure, keep it level or whatever, and that's got to be insane. So I'm glad you guys, you know, do what you do. It's harder than it sounds, I'm sure. So,
well, you were in survival mode at that point. And listen, let me tell you again, and this is just from my law enforcement side. Listen, there are some folks out there that are some pretty bad folks. I mean, they'll do some harm to you if they need to. And here's the deal: I don't ever want to go out there in my life and go, well, I want to find out if you're more trained, if you're a more tactically better individual than I am. I don't want to do that. But if the fight's brought to me, then I don't have a choice at that point, and then that's when that warrior mentality comes out. So you were kind of in the flight mode, which, hey, again, that comes back to avoid. Man, if you can run, you can get the hell out of there. Get the hell out of there. Run, man. Just go. And then if you have to barricade, you know, by denying them entry, you do that. And then it comes down to, hey, man, it's either going to be you or me, and you got to defend yourself. And you say, no way, man. You came to the wrong place at the wrong time. You're the one that's going to go, not me. And you have to fight and defend yourself. You have to defend yourself and other people. It is what it is. So,
cool, man. Well, hey, you guys got an awesome police department. I'm very proud to live very close to you guys, and we want to thank you very much for being Johns Creek Police Department, right? I'll see you.
Thank you, AJ.
Thanks, AJ. Appreciate it, buddy.
Hey, we'll chat soon.
Okay.
All right, Deb. I'm going to go ahead and sign out unless you need
I just want
something else.
to kind of wrap it up. Tell everybody thank you for coming, and see if anybody has any last-minute question before we go. That was a really good conversation with AJ.
I'm looking at Dan here. Dan did bring up a good point about train so you can just react. And with what Sergeant Lane was talking about earlier, like if something happens, a lot of times we just act out of instinct, or when he was talking a little bit about what Major Clifton would talk about. Like, so sometimes as human beings, we want to take the information, we want to process it, and then we want to think about it, and then decide on what we want to do. When you talk about the animal instinct, or you talk about the lizard brain specifically, if you go to grab that lizard, he just takes off. It's just instinct. But he may be taking off in the direction of the road, and a car comes by and hits him and runs over him. So he never really thought about what he was going to do if somebody tried to grab him. And I'm just talking about the lizard. So as human beings, we got to think and say, okay, well, what will we do? Well, we've talked about it here, so you already kind of have it in your brain, a little bit of Okay, well, I remember Sergeant Hood and those guys said, man, I want to avoid them. I want to run. I want to get out of there if I possibly can. And if I can't, then I want to barricade the door and barricade in place and keep them from coming to me, so deny them entry. And if I can't do that, if they're coming in, man, I got to fight them. I got to fight them to the death. Their death, not mine. So we want you to be able to react very quickly as if it's instinct. But if you've never thought about the process, then you're just going to react like the lizard and take off. And you may take off down the hallway just running, and that's when this person engages you and does harm to you. So just this here has already gotten you, with kind of what Dan said here a little bit, has already gotten you in the process of where we've already talked about it. We've processed it through our head. And if something happens, it's going to be more like instinct, but it's going to be in a direction to save our life and not just be like the lizard, run out to the road and get ran over, if that makes sense.
Yep. Okay, well, thank you guys. And thank you everybody for coming and watching. And make sure that you follow us on our Facebook page and our Twitter, Johns Creek PD. And we'll probably plan another one of these in maybe a few weeks or so. Thank
Appreciate
you
guys. Thank you very much. Take
Bye.
care.